Thank you for having me back. Let's jump straight into it because people are hungry. I'll structure this in the only way I know how to ask questions as VCs. It's basically, what's the problem? What's the solution? How you're solving it? And most importantly, what I'm most excited about is, who are you guys? I took some notes about the team, and I really want to talk a bit more about that. But let's start from the very top. Let's do initial introductions, and we'll jump into the problems you're trying to solve. Let's start, Tom.
So my name's Tom Graham, managing partner of TLDR. I came into the crypto space about 7 years ago or so. I was working on a GPU and memory database, and so the only guys interested in density in a 4U stack were really crypto miners, in that case Bitcoin, and people building fast databases. So that was a while ago, and variously in startups. And about 2 years ago, we started TLDR, really to focus on helping develop ecosystems, make smart choices about who to work with, and be part of the industry.
My name is Eugene. I oversee branding and marketing at TLDR. My background is a little bit different from, well, I guess overall our whole team has a pretty diverse background, but I come from marketing and publishing. I was originally at a publication called Hypebeast, which is arguably one of the most well-known sort of men's fashion, sneaker media companies out there. And originally my interest in crypto was around how media could potentially find a way to solve its monetization problem. Whether that's going to fix itself, I'm not sure, but that's sort of my initial sort of vector into it.
My name is Chuck McGraw. I spent 20 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL. I retired back in 2016 and spent about 2 years working at a cybersecurity and IT systems management company. Came on board to TLDR probably earlier this year. My first introduction to crypto was back in 2012. We were up in DC working with a think tank looking at sort of non-kinetic ways to address different problems with remittance back into certain areas of the world that are tied to terrorism. So.
I'm McGregor. I lead up the security and custody team at TLDR. Before coming to TLDR, I was an FBI special agent in cyber division for about 7 years. I first got introduced to crypto mainly because we were arresting people as it relates to it, specifically around money laundering and terrorism. Unfortunately, there was a mandate from the IRS and DOJ that said FBI agents couldn't buy crypto. I wish I could at the time. I would be much happier. No, I'm actually having a great time. I spent a good amount of my time dealing with incident response. Everyone's getting hacked in some capacity, whether you know it or not. In this space, it seems to be a lot more. And as a result, I get a lot of phone calls on how to actually fix the problem.
I'm Alex Yamashita. I started off my career in finance, Goldman Sachs, structured products, and then did that for about 5 years, hated it, quit, did ice cream. I was lucky enough to have Tom give me a look at his company early on, participated in a small way in that. Thank you, Tom. And then really found myself into crypto because I was intellectually bored and I found it really interesting. And then linked up with Tom and a couple of our other friends about 2.5 years ago, and here we are.
So as promised, I promise we'll go more into the teams itself, but we have a spread from financiers to marketing to military to pseudo government. I mean, this is quite a diverse set, probably the most exciting team I've ever met. So let's start from the top before we jump into team stuff. The kind of general tag we have on TLDR is advising companies to prepare for the new token economy. What does that mean to you guys? Shape it in a problem statement sort of way.
Got you. So I think that there are a few interesting problems faced by companies trying to tokenize, and they could be smaller technology companies running through an ICO, or large ecosystems who have their tokens out there and they're trying to build user bases and things like that. And then all the way up into big brands who are trying to work out how to engage users and be more relevant through some of the benefits which come with tokenization. So those problems, they're around security, custody, cybersecurity. On the community side, there's this whole new thing, right? Because many early stage companies, they could just sit there for 3 or 4 years and do nothing, but suddenly you have to be a publicly traded company, and you have to be mature enough as an organization to deal with that and all that baggage. So all of those things are rolled into people going through this tokenization project, and we kind of built a company around solving some of those problems and bringing together cybersecurity. Eugene is very modest, but he's very famous in the fashion publishing world.
He really is.
Very famous,
Being
yeah.
Very.
the
I'm
founding
too old
editor.
to know
of-
that, but other people younger are like, Eugene.
a founding
Yeah.
editor of Hypebeast. We have other people with kind of deep agency backgrounds. I have a company, which is a machine learning company, sells a lot of things to brands. So that perspective around how do you be relevant to a group of people, how do you build communities around the world, was something that's really, really core to our mission. And so we're about 40 people located in 8 or 9 markets, Asia, US, Europe, which is mostly London and Berlin for us. So we really try to be a facilitator and a conduit for networks and help really bring people's kind of vision to fruition through some of those like really specific crypto things.
Can I answer the question a little differently?
Sure.
We're kind of bringing back the idea of a merchant bank. So you get infused with money from somewhere, and now you have to build a business, and there's a lot of different pieces that need to go into that. When you sort of look at the team, this is a small representation of TLDR, you've got all the missing pieces of a company represented. So whether it's the financial side, it's the marketing community side, it's the security side, you have a resource, a single resource that cares about growing the business to maturity, and that's where we focus.
And what I find helpful is, and what I learned is, oftentimes, we talk a lot about what we do, so how we're advising and all that, but seldom do we hear why we do it, why companies do it, and that really is the kind of the North Star that keeps companies surviving. So we're talking about the mission and vision of companies. What would that be for you guys, both on perhaps let's do on a company level, and I'd love to hear also from an individual level. The vision, mission for this, and perhaps even the space you guys are getting into.
I think from my point of view, just quickly, the mission kind of flows through from, for me personally, this feels like the big platform shift that, of my age bracket. A little bit too young for social, definitely for .com, and this one has way more impact than a bunch of those other things like mobile and that kind of thing. So if you're going to do something and you have the opportunity to do that, may as well be in a space like this. It's super fascinating on the technology side and all the interesting teams and global perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, for me, on the why side, I kind of fell into this initially, as I mentioned, looking for a sort of a solution towards the inability for media to monetize in this current state in an ad-driven world. Then as I entered sort of TLDR, and then I recognized my ability to learn and to like kind of draw on the experiences of my peers. I think that's what has kept me most excited. And everyone has done something very successful in their past life, and now we're all sort of coming together, and there's a sense of trust and building something that I don't think has ever been done before. And that to me is super exciting, and having the chance to learn with everyone on stage, plus the people that aren't here, it's never boring, right? And I think the minute you're not learning something, that's immediately when you disengage, that's when people move on to jobs. And I think that looking at the landscape we have, there's always going to be something to learn.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing too, as well, is that you think about the vision, that's where you want to go, that's what you want to become. The mission is like those key objectives that you're going to hit on the way there. And then the exciting thing for me, and what I really enjoy, and the why behind why I love doing this, being with the team, and then also working with our different clients, is the strategy side of it. You sit there and you think, like, how do we help teams and how do we help ourselves get to where we want to go? How do we achieve that vision? How do we achieve those objectives? I give the analogy, it's like every day I wake up and I have a Rubik's Cube sitting on my desk. It's called Life of TLDR, and I sit there and I work on it all day, and I make great progress, or even externally with a client as well. They have this idea of where they want to go, and it's building that strategy, working on that Rubik's Cube, and at the end of the day, feeling that sense of gratification that I pretty much have the Rubik's Cube solved. But in this day and age and the way that things are, I wake up the next morning, the Rubik's Cube is completely reset, and we get to start over every single time, and that's fun to just keep working through and progressing, and seeing the teams progress as well.
I'd say for myself, it's the same answer for both personal and company, that it's helping people that either can't help themselves or need help, and need a resource to lean on. You look at the FBI, had a great time there. It's a great mission. I've done all the kicking indoors and arresting people, and counterterrorism, antagonized crime, cybercrime. And the one thing I realized was that when you get down to it, the biggest threat, and multiple people have said it, from President Obama down that cyber is the biggest threat that's sort of attacking us, and it's mainly because my example to this is short of a handful of people in large companies or connections to government, if anyone gets hacked, they actually don't know who to call. They don't have a resource. Think about that right now. Who would you call if you knew if you got hacked? Someone was extorting you. Someone was taking your money. Someone was going to create harm. You actually don't know if I can call 911 or 999 or 112, depending on what country you're on. Being able to be that resource is gratifying.
Well, you guys hit on a number of really good things, but I think for me it really boils down to working with smart, hungry, good people in no particular order. I feel as if I'm just stimulated and operate best when I'm around people that are better or more accomplished than me in something. So yeah, that's the sort of very micro personal reason.
And the reason I ask is, as advisory firms, as service providers, team is ultimate key. And I think what's being demonstrated here is the diversity, both in backgrounds and also in geographies. So we mentioned, Tom, earlier, the team is spread across multiple places. This is a decentralized team. Guys, how does that work? How do you guys work day to day? Who is driving the team? Is there someone spearheading the culture, the decision making?
I really think that it starts kind of with Chuck's experience, and then it's applied into how it works in a digital landscape and for what we do.
Yeah, if you think about the military in general, after 9/11, we had to run operations 24/7 around the world and without ceasing. Failure was not an option. So learning how to be in a completely distributed and decentralized sort of layout and be able to execute time and time again to perfection, bring in some of those best practices and bring them to the team, and then sharing them, and then identifying what does and what doesn't work. And the thing is, we have trying to take the talent on the team and not make them conform to a system that I think it works or that maybe another organization thinks works, but take what they already do, what they already have done, their experience that they bring to the table, and build the systems around the team to support the team is sort of fundamental how we operate.
And in doing that, kind of digging a little deeper, I mean, there's obviously some secret sauce. There's something about your experience, through 20 years of intense training. Is it something that others can eventually figure out, or they're really something quite unique from everything that you've done that you're bringing to the TLDR team?
People think that there's some secret sauce or something super hard, but to be honest, it's really not. It's just a matter of discipline and focus and drive and setting achievable objectives. And we are incredibly open and honest, and the trust between the team is incredible. And I think that's really what drives perfection amongst us, is having that ability to say, hey, I disagree. I don't think that is right. Or, hey, we need to talk about this. There's a problem arising. We can sense it. Just being transparent is huge, and continue to, that trust that we have between all of us is one of the most important things.
I'd also add, it's the being able to lead and being willing to follow. That is very important. I think over time, over life, I've finally got to that point in maturity where I can say, hey, I think I feel comfortable leading, but I don't know everything. And every day at TLDR, I'll run across something where I say, I have a deficiency. But I know that, and I remove my ego, and I say, okay, let me lean on Eugene for marketing. I have no idea how to actually reach the community that I'm looking to reach, but he does, and I'm willing to sit and learn and listen. But oh wait, there's some major problem that's happening that we're on the custody side. I need to lead and sort of drive that product to market. So you have to be able to know your place, and at some point it might be leading. At some point it might be just being a good follower.
And that segues nicely to the question I want to ask you, Andre, about security. You mentioned, it continues to be a problem.
Yeah.
If as TLDR is helping participate in building this new economy, tokenized economy, can you give us an idea or a sense of how severe is the security problem today in the technologies that we're discussing, and who, other than in addition to you guys, can truly identify and address these problems on security?
So in general, there's three problems in security. The biggest problem is really born on people like myself, which is we as cybersecurity professionals need to create better products for the environment so that people like my mother can just operate and not have to think about all the security aspects around it. That's the number one. Number two is always going to be that humans are developing code and therefore it'll have bugs, which means you always need to be aware of the fact of how am I developing my product, how am I doing QA, am I bringing in outside external pen tests, not something that is internal. I'm willing to sort of, again, remove the ego and say, teach me, learn, help me be better. And then third is there's the human aspect, which is humans are fallible. I spend a lot of time doing counterintelligence. If I want to gain close to anyone in this room, I can. I know 100% I can because I know how to reach that person, what's their vice or what's their desires, and then from there I'm going to be able to access whatever I'm looking to access. Now take that on the digital side. I'm going to be able to get into your accounts. I'm going to be able to get into your computer. I'm going to be able to pivot to high-value targets. And in this case, it's money. And it's a stored value that is something that's hard to protect, right? It's you may have a Trezor or a Ledger, and I can get next to you, or I can we deal with a lot of people that get hacked because of what we call misplaced trust. They thought the person around them was someone they could trust, but in fact they stole their seed or their private key, and that's the end of it. But on the other end, it's sort of we have to sort of think about how are we protecting this very easy to steal product, right? And as a result, we've now noticed that there's a there's a cyber criminal team that used to target old people that didn't really have good sort of technology acumen, and they realized, well, wait a second, we can take the same techniques and focus it on people that have lots of money. And that's exactly what's happening. So if all the SIM swapping that's happening right now, we actually know the team that's doing it. I mean, not know them, but we know of them. We're working with security teams at Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the account takeovers because they basically said, hey, instead of targeting people that give me $100, $200, I can target people that give me $100, $200 million, right? So it's a very severe problem, and we deal with about 1 to 2 hacks a week. Like I get a phone call 1 or 2 times a week of someone getting hacked.
And to that point about a team's composition also infers their network. Given your experiences, you are able to identify who are the attackers, and you are aware, and not just it's coming in, but based on the previous experiences, you kind of know globally where the threats could be coming from.
Well, that's the strength that we have on the team from the security side is, yes, I'm a cyber special agent, but I've got 2 other FBI cyber special agents also on the team, Chuck with his physical security and sort of threat experience. This is all actual stuff that we're dealing with. It's not theoretical. It's not stuff that we've read in the newspaper. We've disrupted these attacks. We know how the adversary works, and therefore we know the easy way in. And at all points in time, you will always usually use the easy way in, and people are just not doing the right things. And so going back to the first thing that's wrong, we as cybersecurity professionals need to provide you with better tools and better knowledge to be able to know how to protect yourself or not have to think about it and you just operate in the world that you're in.
That's obviously one very important feature, but how much of that contributes to the story you're trying to tell for TLDR? When you're building out the brand, let's start from what's the ideal story and how much of this emphasis would be on security and other parts.
Yeah, I think Tom can definitely lead with that one.
So I think that we're interested in working with people and teams and companies that have the emotional maturity of a team, the product, the ability to execute, to be around for 5, 6 years through, a little bit of a crypto winter now, ramping up through kind of like adoption phases and stuff like that. If you're sloppy around security and you don't clean up your email and your organization, do the basic hygiene, it's a massive attack surface, and it's a systemic risk for your company. If you get a bunch of your treasury stolen or something like that, or there's a big hack and it's publicized, that's really bad. So some of those things on the custody side are really, really simple to solve. The stuff that's really difficult is kind of incident response, like who are you going to call? Do you know the chief security officer at Verizon to go in and SIM clone your SIM or something like that? That's very, very difficult. But what's really easy is solving some of the things around email and permissions and insider threat and all of that stuff. So for us, it's a really crucial part of preparing companies to be there long term, to actually be sustainable, because it is a binary outcome. losing all of your tokens or massive hack. So that's really one important element. It's a new thing for small companies, right? Even for large companies in the traditional financial sector. You don't have to worry about a binary outcome from a hack or something like that. And to be honest, in startups, no one is really targeting you. This is one thing that I find super interesting, and I didn't really think about it until interacting with Andre and the team, is that people really discount in their mind that risk. They don't do the actuarial insurance kind of analysis and put money or time against it, and then suddenly, it's done. Strangely, even you see people get hacked, and then they forget about it, and they don't get hacked for a month, and they don't want to do stuff about it. They don't follow through. So I find that very, very strange from a psychology point of view. And founders and teams, they're hard working, they are busy, there's a lot of things going on, they're having to raise money, they're having to deal with organizational problems, all of these kinds of things. It's very difficult to focus on the easy stuff, but it's systemic for us. So that's why we invested a lot in building out that team, building up those competencies, and that flows all the way up and down the ecosystem, really, from the massive pre-existing exchanges which are launching crypto companies and things like that, all the way down to the little startup. All are equal kind of targets for these criminal syndications which have laser focused in on crypto people.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed as well is that we all come from different walks of life, but through Chuck, through Andre and the rest of the security team, you're able to garner all this education and understanding. Then all of a sudden when I go to hang out with fashion people, I go hang out with artists or whatever, you're actually providing them and shedding light on something that they otherwise maybe they didn't think about. And all of a sudden you're kind of increasing, people's awareness of this stuff. So I think that was one of the unintended sort of upsides of having such a close resource, but also us kind of, in our off time or our circles, we were able to bring new knowledge to them. That is arguably going to be relevant to everybody going forward.
Yeah, and I personally can sense that. I mean, our Hong Kong airline, Cathay Pacific, just got hacked. That's 9.4 million very detailed data points all out there.
I got hacked by Facebook and Cathay, or my data was revealed both in 1 week.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think that Asia's going to have a lot more hacks, unfortunately, mainly because the US went through a very bad pain point through around 2010 to 2013. On the news all the time, all the banks were getting hacked. It was, sort of America's not doing a good job around security, and we weren't doing a good job around security. We are now. There are still some issues on some of the SMB side of things, but on the enterprise level, there's frameworks, there's, companies that have chief security officers or chief information security officers, they recognize the need to respect the cyber threat, and now the adversary needs to shift because they always want to make money, and so the adversary sort of sits in places where there's a lot of developers. So you don't think of places like India, a lot of hacking coming out of there, Brazil also, and then Eastern Europe. But Asia has a lot of money and doesn't have chief security officers or information security officers or frameworks. So guess what's going to happen? A lot, and that's why if you look at the exchanges that are getting hacked, there's not that many that are happening on the Western side as they are happening on the Eastern.
What's interesting, also something that's not really apparent publicly, but there are multiple major hacks a week. And the ones which are reported and the ones which come out in the public are a tiny percentage of those.
Yes.
And that is exactly the same through big banks and big industry in the normal world. There's very little reporting. Makes it very hard for insurers to build up data sets. Makes it very hard for people to take this stuff seriously. But there's no real incentive for a company to report, like Cathay did, because that must have been a really big one.
Yeah,
right?
it was a massive one. I mean, I know we're spending a bit of time here talking about security, but the rationale here is, in this, new economy, tokenized economy, I mean, the ability to access that data really becomes the essence, the underlying essence of an economy. So in this new token economy, what does that mean to you guys? In terms of whether we go by geography, so is that going to be something between developed nations and underdeveloped nations? Is it something to do with verticals? We talked a bit about airlines, banks, those are the obvious ones. What is this new token economy?
So I think that
and hence the emphasis on security.
There's incredible flatness across the world when it comes to this new breed of companies and organizations which are engaging in the token economy. And that's like one of the things that we're really interested in is distributed teams. So you may be based somewhere, but you may be distributed all over the place. That means that you have kind of distribution risk and extra ways into your company. And lots of organizations share that. So I think that the digital nature of communications and all the different ways in creates kind of a very flat picture for the like geographies and that kind of thing. You get, interestingly, if you go and talk to a very, very established financial firm or a big fund or something like that, they have a lot of procedures in place, they're very professional about what they do. There are very, very few crypto organizations in the economy which are at that level, very, very few. And so the ones with more money, more time, better management who are focused on a wider diversity of company building like perspectives will build out these resources and protections faster. And they will be the safe ones. Because if you don't want to bother trying to attack somebody that's hard to attack when you attack the little guy, and it's really, really easy. So
Right.
I think that there's an upper class and a lower class based on how fast people can process all the stuff you have to do in a company before you get to, fixing this problem.
Right. And doing all that stuff in the company and being that you're very decentralized, how important is FaceTime? So, when people need to come together, I'm sure this is probably a rare occasion for all the partners, really, to be here. But when you operate a team that's all spread out, how important is being, how do you plan being physically together? Do you need to be physically together? Oftentimes, it's difficult for us to think about team cohesion and kind of hierarchy, because coming from a very traditional point of view as top-down, FaceTime is very important. We think efficiency is produced by people aggregating together at one spot. So kind of going back to the team mentality and what's actually done, how important is it to you for people to come together? And can you have systems in place that you can easily actually operate decentralized without needing to waste time and resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, FaceTime with each other, spending time with each other is incredibly important. You can never discount that. The ability just to think about the feedback loop. Whenever you're sending an email, you wait for them to reply, somebody replies to you, you're standing by, maybe something was missed in communication, maybe there's some type of static in the way. So of course, FaceTime is always paramount. I think if you take it a step further and look, as long as you have a clear understanding of what needs to be done, how to do it, you have your boundaries which you need to work in, and clearly defined timelines. The communication aspect, now that is paramount. You don't need to be face-to-face all the time. As long as we can quickly pick up the phone, get on Slack or whatever it may be, and be able to find out what you need to know to allow you to go ahead and make those decisions you need to and be able to maintain a resiliency in the environment you're working in. That's the important thing. Every single person here has the ability to execute and make decisions on their own. It may not even have to pick up the phone. I think because it's very, very clear the objectives that we need to achieve. So delegating that authority down to every single person, and it's not just the partners, it's everybody on our team has that ability to make those decisions without having to say, hey, here's a problem, what do I do? Instead of command by negation is something that we talk about in the military a lot. It means I have a problem, here's my solution, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to execute on that unless somebody tells me not to. So command by negation, and everybody here has that open dialogue, like here's the problem, this is what I see it to do, I'm going to execute any input, and then we just go, and we just constantly move and communicate.
And how does accountability as a concept fold into this way of doing things?
It's huge. I mean, I think when you've been given that, ability to make decisions at all levels of organization, the person making that decision has to be accountable for their actions and what they choose to do. But at the same time, if you're in a position of authority and you've delegated that down, you can delegate your authorities, but you cannot delegate your responsibility. So say we're working on a project team, if I'm in charge, if I've delegated the authority to make decision, if something goes wrong, that person will own it, but at the same time, I'm gonna say, hey, listen, I'm responsible for the team and the end state. Everybody talks about flat organizations. In the end, one person has to say, it's my fault, I own this, and I think that's also paramount as well.
I would say the other thing that's important is having a good set of collaborative tools. I mean, a lot of companies are Google Suite because it's cheap, quite frankly. But and things like Slack and Zoom. But most recently, we started to have our weekly meetings where everyone needs to turn on their camera so we can all see each other on Zoom. And it looks like a really big Brady Bunch set of squares. But essentially, I want to be able to see Alex. And unfortunately for him, the call was at a time when it's like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m.
1 a.m.
We're working on that.
That's all right, though, for you, Andre.
Sorry. It could have been worse, given 1 a.m. for me. But I want to be able to see everyone we're working with. And really, it was an example from our time at Tanium, which is a cybersecurity company in the Silicon Valley. We went from 100 people to 800 people, where 75% of the company was remote office, did not work in a Tanium office. But the two things that we required in the company, which was paramount, one was open calendars. So no one's allowed to have a private calendar where I don't know what you're doing. Like, we shouldn't be at that point. Except the CEO, once you get to like 800, you don't want to have those personnel HR meetings there. But outside of that, open calendar. And number two, open camera. So you want to be able to say, hey, short of you're in a car somewhere or in an airplane, you're just dialing in, you're not going to participate. I want to be able to see and know that you're not just on a speakerphone and people are just sort of like listening and waiting for them to say, oh, my name, and then, oh, what'd you say? We've all been through those conversations where you kind of tuned out for 30 minutes until your name was called, and then you say your little piece and you go away. Like, that's not useful to the rest of the team. Like, you want to be able to see, touch and hear, use all your senses. And how do you do that remotely? Collaborative tools.
Yeah. I think one thing too that we're quite good at is when things go down, there's always the open floor, and then we kind of encourage people to highlight what didn't work out as well and how do we fix it. And that's one thing, like even like last week, Alex brought to people's attention, this call isn't very productive, can we find a way to fix it? And I think that's something that's really important for us, especially as the space moves so quickly. Like, your strategy, day one is going to be different from day 30 just because of the way things change, teams might grow, things become less important. And that's part of it, but also I think if you look at, if there's a 360-degree sort of scope around you, we'd like to see everything around us. You're constantly trying to achieve that, but since everyone has sort of a high operating level, you're generally considering more things to account for that maybe someone a little bit more junior, a little bit greener, hasn't gone through the experience and taken note, I need to also think about this random thing. Yep. So that's always also really helpful.
And just to add one thing as well, too, I think it's fundamental that you actually find and work with and hire and bring on board good people. It sounds so obvious, but it's really tough to do. And I think that sets a really strong fundamental baseline, because ultimately everybody has a mutual respect for everybody else. And as a result of that, when people talk to you, you actually listen, right? And that also helps with accountability, because ultimately, sometimes, with the 1 a.m. calls, I'm like, this is so annoying. But you know what? Andre's waking up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and hell, I mean, we don't get to be in an office all the time together, so I can stay up an hour or so later to do this. It's a small ask ultimately.
It's important what you just said, because Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Associates, he has a set of principles. If you haven't read them, you should read them. They work in a vacuum. They don't necessarily work all the time. But one of the principles that's really important for me is hire right, because the consequences are huge for hiring wrong, which is very true. Yep. By the time you actually look for someone, you get them into being a cultural fit, ideally, and training and everything else, and you realize that they're not a good fit, you're now back to square one. And then the worst thing you can have as well is someone that you don't like. We actually all like each other, and I say that actually because there's so many teams I've been on in life, from college all the way up, where I'm just like, I don't like you. I don't like anything about you. I think you're an awful person. Yep. But I have to respect you, ? Because I'm in a seniority-based organization and you're higher than me. Yep. But I don't respect you because you're an awful person. Yep. Like, why do we want to be in a space like that, right?
Why put up with that shit, right?
Yeah. There's something we try to be really conscious about. It's thinking about the soft networks and things which are created by teams. And so if you think about a regular startup, hierarchical, you're all in the garage from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock at night. You're pounding out that code or product or whatever. That is an incubator for a real strong set of social networks, personal friendships, all of the things which drive accountability, productivity, enjoyment. No one's burning out because everyone's relying on each other. So if you're distributed, you have to think about that. What is your mechanism for building those soft networks, which make someone get up late at night, or which mean that you are going to put in the extra work and actually deliver on what you have promised the organization and what you are good at and that kind of thing, and what your kind of colleagues are relying on you for. So from that point of view, the distributed thing definitely has communication debt and organizational productivity debt. We try to work through that by being kind of flat and open. That's one thing. We all knew each other variously through one connection or another before coming together and working together. So there's this established kind of social network. There's a lot of trust and reliance there. And you have to really lean into those things and create an environment where, I am kind of like, I like to focus on something and I'll look up 5 hours later and I've missed 3 phone calls. And Chuck will slap me around because that's not what my job is, basically. But that's what I really want to do. You have to create that kind of culture.
We are genuinely fearful of Chuck.
I'm like the nicest guy.
But it's not because of a variety of reasons that you think someone should be fearful of Chuck. It's because you don't want to disappoint. And it's not just Chuck, it's the entire team. But really, like, Chuck is the taskmaster. He's the, U.S. Congressman, the majority whip. Like, he's the guy that's going to sort of like get us in shape and get us to where we need to go. And if we fail, it's a hard fail. It's a heavy fail. It's a burden. And I mean, he'll do the calculation of time it takes when you don't follow through. And chasing someone down. He's done this to me a few times on my expenses, for example, quite a few times. But it really takes it to heart because he also wants to do other things, right? So if he's chasing me down, and I'm gonna use my own weakness of I really suck at submitting my expenses on time, I really do. But by me being deficient, it makes him deficient. And that's the same on other teams. So like, we have a team that's, like a quarter lawyers and, they're really used to service oriented that this contract needs to be done at 2 p.m. on Tuesday because at 2:01, if it's not, then there's a whole set of things that fall apart on the supply chain. And that's actually what happens with us is that if, I fall apart or someone else falls down on something, we completely, slow everything down.
He
wants to defend himself?
No. It's funny. Is I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is I open my eyes. I look over in my nightstand. I grab my phone. I start going through my Slack messages and you start looking at my emails. Every evening when I'm laying in bed, I'm still like communicating, whether it's informal, sort of dialogue, or if it's something about work. The bottom line is we're having fun. And we have a passion to be on this team and to work together and work with our clients. I mean. My first conference last year, I thought was the most amazing thing to see that all these different types of walks of life. You had straight up suits from institutional investors to the 15-year-old multi-millionaire that just hit it well. And you look at the room, and it was such an amazing group of like different backgrounds. And the thing is, they didn't see that there was any difference. They didn't see themselves as sort of any difference at all. And I think we're having fun and we're enjoying that. And I think as long as you're doing that and what you're doing every day, who cares if you're working 14, 16-hour days? It's well worth it.
And it's so important that the partners here can talk so openly and honestly about that culture, because we know culture kills companies, culture builds companies. It's all about the culture. And what I liked in particular, something Andre just said is, the accountability isn't that there's no one's wrong. It's just that you have disappointed everyone else around you. And I think that kind of approach to it is very powerful. It brings the responsibility back to oneself, and then that's pretty amazing. I'm running very short on time here. I do have one more question, which kind of leans on what Tom's talking about, soft network, because I would love to know, with this diverse group, what does that network look like? Essentially, my question is going to be around, maybe like let's go somewhere, let's do something fun. The coolest encounter that you guys have, the reach. You can bring in some pretty amazing kind of marketing firepower into this, given this network. What do you guys have planned? Who can you bring in?
I'm just going to say the coolest story. I love this story.
That's exactly what I was going for, Andre.
And it has nothing to do with crypto at all. I'm going to make it a minute and a half. I'm arresting this mobster. He's a captain of the banana crime family. I'm arresting him for murder, and it's like guns drawn. Wife's crying. Mom's crying. And we're like, just tell us where the guns are. And he's like, there are no guns in the house. I'm like, for your safety, our safety, tell us where the guns are. He's like, there's no guns in the house. I'm like, no, but tell us where the guns are. He's like, I swear on my daughter's eyes, there are no guns in this house. And I'm just like, I actually believe you. Like, who does that? Like, your daughter's crying. So we take him out to the federal building, and we're sitting down. He's like, you know what, Andre? Like, you have a job to do. I have a job to do. Today they crossed. That's what happened. I'm just like, you're the most respectful mobster I ever met in my life. And he's like, you know what?
Now he's our chief marketing officer.
If things were different, I'd take you to Parisi's Deli. We'd sit down. I'd get you an Italian sub. We talk about life. We talk about love.
Yeah.
But, here we are. And I'm just like, yeah. Like, at the end of the day, business is business, right?
Right.
And you treat people with respect. So it's even like at the mobster murderer level, he's still like, hey, like, you have a job to do. I'm going to treat you with respect, and I treat him with respect, and like that's what you want to do, and that's how you create. I'm not using that network in any way in crypto, but that's how you create network is respect.
No, but that draws my final question, which is about the ability to read through people, to understand, because at the end of the day, as much tech as we're talking about is driven by human beings. They're the clients for you guys. They're the ones that that you have to vet in order to take on. Kind of like last comments on through all this various experiences, does that give you a much sharper eye, a different angle to read people, to understand them, to to trust them, so that you can be better business partners and be able to kind of build this up together?
I'll lead that one. The thing is, not one person up here has the sole answer. So I think every time we meet something or have a project or whatever it may be, we're very much like, we get an understanding of what's going on. We think about it. We think through it. What is this? Do we want to work with this person? Do we trust this person? But then that's not the end. We ask everybody else's opinion, and we get every single different perspective. It's like when you sit around, you look at an elephant and you say, hey, what do you see? Everybody's going to tell you something different. So it's the same thing. We all take everybody's input in quite just the same, and it all has an equal weight, but not everybody up here. It's everybody in the company.
I think everyone has different qualities that they're looking for. Alex is big on, scrappiness and sort of being able to kind of get in the grit and work, the hustle. For me, if it's an important enough relationship or partnership, I want to meet that person and sit down directly. I'm really good at reading people. And I want them to read me. I want them to know that, like, hey, like, you're understanding what I'm telling you, and, vice versa. So I'm willing to get on a plane, fly across the world. That's why I'm in Asia. Alex has been nice enough to sort of drive the business in Asia, but he says there's a security vacuum here. And I don't know the Asian culture as well as I need to. I know the U.S., but we need to expand out here. So I need to rely on him to put me in meetings to be able to let them read me. And I'm starting to learn, okay, don't say that, don't do that. Okay, this is because it's just a completely different culture. But you need to sort of like have that FaceTime. It can't be remote.
Yeah. With that, we're over, but if anyone has, I'll take 2 questions, if any. If not, I'll have one final one, which I've been dying to ask. Well, kind of towards you guys. Can I ask if we know who killed JFK?
JFK?
I can ask much more recent, but it's too controversial. I'll start with the basics. While you
ask if they know who Satoshi is.
Oh, can I ask that one? Do we know
now your attention is
if I can do that.
I don't.
I didn't ask it. Tom asked that one. Do we know who Satoshi is? Really?
Pretty quiet up here.
I'm not saying anything.
Is that no comment?
I'm not saying anything.
I'm a lawyer. I know exactly what that means.
The real question is, oh, now I forgot. So that's called the bridge.
The bridge. Thank you. If there's no more questions, we're waiting for lunch, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roland.
Team.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.